Go get online so I can hear.
If you just get a little.
If you want a microphone, we just give her a microphone.
Oh, that's
Here,
okay.
okay?
I don't want to make it so
It should be expected.
I can just sit down.
Okay. Hello, virtual Sangha. Just a few announcements. We will continue our weekly novena prayers every Thursday at 5:45 p.m. Eastern Time. You are invited to join us for these and to send any prayer requests for yourself and others, both living and deceased, to prayer@heartwoodrefuge.org. Again, that's prayer@heartwoodrefuge.org. Names and prayer requests will be silently read, not shared publicly, just so you're aware. We also have our next Final Friday Fun Night coming up. This one will be an untalent show. So it could be things that you feel comfortable doing, maybe things you don't feel so comfortable doing. All of that is welcome. So get that ready for the last Friday of the month. Save the date because on March 8th at 9 a.m. Eastern Time, Heartwood will host the virtual 20th anniversary celebration of the Outstanding Women in Buddhism Awards. You can register for this on our website. Please follow, like, and share Heartwood on social media. And you can also donate to Heartwood by going to the website or selecting Heartwood or Amazon Smile or purchasing items on Amazon, on our Amazon wish list. And thanks to everyone who's donated thus far. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you. This is a test 543211234. Shall I begin?
That microphone.
But we don't get to see.
Oh, I didn't think we did that on Sunday.
Just sometimes.
We're streaming.
Sometimes.
Ready?
So, welcome. It looks a little different for me today because I'm just looking at a white screen. Am I early? Maureen sent me an email the other day about a person who had several near-death experiences. One, I don't think you could call it near-death because he'd been dead for 28 minutes. You know, he says when you come back from that, excuse me, you have a sense of humor. I will take a glass of water that was sitting here. Could somebody get me a copy of a Vasudi Maga and turn it to the chapter on advocates for me? I'm going to use it in my talk. I'm sorry, I have a sort of a dry cough here today. Want me to wear those instead? Okay. But it's not COVID. Already had the test. So don't lose your focus. Okay. I'm going to give a talk today that's actually based on an article that was written by B. Allen Wallace, who's a prolific author and translator of Buddhist texts. I won't give you all of his collegiate credentials and all of that. I just want to suffice it to say that this article is very much in accord with many of our well-known monastic scholars in its interpretation of the Dharma and the place and purpose of the Dharma in our lives. And we've been having a conversation, I think, for the past 3 weeks or close to a month, and it's culminating in something. So if you just stay with me, I think we will get to it. You know, our minds don't change overnight unless we have like some type of a transformative, earth-shaking experience that just breaks and shatters our like the structure of appearances for us, how things look and see. And if we don't have that, then generally it's a gradual shift, a gradual maturing, a gradual So I think we have a sound problem, and I can't tell from the screen, so I'll just wait until somebody says to me, continue.
Did you turn it up? You can't hear it.
Okay. Somebody's looking at the screen, right? You can see people on the screen. So if I say, can you hear me, and give me a thumbs up, somebody in this room can see that. And you know, we're entirely online now, and it's very intensive with a few people, so we're having to train every week, and our technology is complicated. So I appreciate your patience and your indulgence, and I also appreciate all of the volunteers who are here every day of the week to help us by offering their services in learning how to use this complicated technical equipment, because without them, we would not be able to come to you like this, and I certainly would have no ministry. So were you able to find the book? Okay, I know Sister has one. Did you get, I have one in my room.
There's like 9 of them in the library.
There should be 9 in the library. Vasudi Mata, the pathway to purification.
Like I texted you. I texted that to you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Rachel's got it.
Put the YouTube up here, please.
I'm sorry.
If we at the back, I can find it really fast. So, thank you. And so this article is on mindfulness versus the path to spiritual awakening. And it speaks to us, and I'm going to move all around the article, and I want to preface it by saying that the Buddha wasn't the sort of teacher who simply answered questions. He taught us which questions to ask because he understood the power of questions. He understood that they give shape to your knowledge and onto the answers that you hope will fill up the holes in your own view. But here's the thing, that even if you use the right information to answer a wrong question, then it can take on the wrong form, or you come away with the wrong impression, or the wrong idea, or the wrong attitude. And then you'll end up applying what you think is the right answer to the wrong situations, and of course we'll end up with the wrong results. That's why it was important, and why the Buddha was careful to map out, you could call it a science of questions. So as you're reading the Pali Canons, you notice that he usually starts them off with a question. That's because he's already surveyed the minds of the people. He has an understanding of how they understand things or how they see things, and knowing that it is an incorrect view that's based on incorrect perceptions. He would say, "What do you think, old monk? Such and such and such and such." And then they would answer the question according to how they thought. And then he'd go on to like sort of correct their perception or their understanding. And when he did that, there was a lot of repetition so that one would remember it, because we already are programmed in a certain way, so that we don't even have to try to think about what we think. It just like pops up like, this is me, this is how I am, this is what I know. And so he was working through that to kind of break that go-to place. And he would give the question, and then he would pose the question, and they would answer, and two or three sometimes would answer, and then he'd go into a discourse. And I won't say it was a conversation, because he asked the question, and after he heard their response, he went into a discourse. You know, we like to conversate. We like to talk. We like to share our opinions, but you know, actually, we have them already. The purpose of coming together to learn the Dharma is actually to hear and ponder the opinions of and the views and the rationale, the explanations of the Buddha and the awakened ones, and see how that impacts us, see how that works with or alters our perceptions. But we are more likely to take what they say and put it up against our perceptions and either punch holes in it because we don't see it that way, we don't accept it that way, we don't know it that way, we don't like it that way, we don't want it that way. Because of this, we cannot inherit the fruit that's promised through the practice. And that's why some people have been practicing for 20 and 30 years and are still crazy after all these years, because their method of inquiry and the attitude towards the inquiry is incorrect. And so if you're looking to his teachings for answers and you want to get the most of them, you should be clear about what questions you're bringing to it. And you should be clear about whether you are fitting them into your perception, or whether you are willing to really look at your perception in light of these teachings. Otherwise, you waste your time and you waste your teacher's time, and but more than that, you lose the rare and precious opportunity to awaken. So I know that I myself have had some students for 10 or 15 years, their view is absolutely the same as it was when we first met. And I have talked until my tongue is tired. I have explained, I have shared, I have pointed them to, I have given extensive explanation. I have had witnesses to the fruit of exerting right effort in these regards, but they're still the very same. They're still the very same. They do the very same things. They cause the very same confusion. So what can you do with that? I say to you, seize this opportunity. We so presently, desperately need it. We all say we want to be the change that we need to see in our here and now society, our American society, and our global society, to keep us from just destruction, global destruction, but that takes a certain skill. And the reason we are where we are is because we've been using what we had, and we can see that is woefully insufficient. And so if we're looking into places where we can gather more wisdom, more skill, more compassion, more greater capacity, more enablement, to be a part of the solution, then we have to give it a real try. And a real try means submitting yourself to the teachings. That's how you investigate to see whether or not they are true, is if one is willing to submit themselves to the premise. He talks about this being like a laboratory. When you go into a laboratory, you have a hypothesis. You don't just go in and say, let's just mix some stuff and see what happens. No, you have a hypothesis, a theory, and you're putting it to the test. And if you're not doing that in your Dharmic study, then you're not going to get the benefit from it, and you won't inherit the fruit. And so the Buddha talks about dead-end questions that lead to a thicket of views, a wilderness of views, a contortion, or riffing, a fetter of views. And bound by a fetter of views, you don't gain freedom from birth or aging and death, from sorrow, lamentation, pain, distress, or despair. In other words, any attempt, to answer these questions is unskillful, blocking the path to true freedom. And a lot of times we are asking those questions because we really want to know, but it's like why I saw a movie one time, it got to be a real heated argument in court, and he slapped the desk, and he said, "I want the truth," and the guy said, "You can't handle the truth." And so this is a matter sometimes of wanting the truth, but can't handle the truth. But we could handle the truth if we really took the Dharma and begin to, he says, put it to the test, try to prove it wrong. You don't even have to try to prove it right. You can try to prove it wrong. We don't try to prove our own views wrong. I mean, once we have one, we're solid, straight on, spot on, right. We don't even have to discuss that. That goes without saying, But when something comes up that rubs against that, then we immediately set out to prove it wrong. But Buddha says, no problem. You can prove it right. You can prove it wrong. But whatever, prove it. Prove it in this sense is almost like proofing it. It's like a process you go through to get something ready, and you have to go back and adjust it, and sometimes you have to start all over again, or sometimes we can only go so far with our understanding now, and we have to let that soak in. It's like the difference between a hard rain and it hits the earth and just flows right off. You say, yes, I see, yes, I know, but it's dried up in a day or two, versus a gentle rain that will just hit the soil and seep deep into the earth and water those seeds, that can sprout up and bring us into full understanding. Along with understanding, the quality of understanding is release. The quality of understanding is relief. The taste of understanding is freedom. It is liberty. It's liberating, and it comes as a result. Like a revelation that brings about a transformation in you. So I want to talk a little bit about, and I have been talking about our poor understanding of practice that has profound implications, for our progress on the path. And I really want to talk about the disparity. My mic went out. Okay, I want to talk about the disparity or the discrepancy in the descriptions of now I need a Majima Nikaya too. Sorry, can somebody give me one? About the discrepancies between the description of mindfulness and the actual practice of modern mindfulness. And it's important because millions of people are studying this, practicing it. And there really is a disparity between the modern Vipassana and the traditional Theravada and Mahayana literature. And if you look at the Theravada and the Mahayana, you find that they are pretty much in accord. They might have different methods but their goal is the same. They might have different specific practices, but their goal is the same. So the problem is not so much between Theravada, Mahayana, and Vajrayana, which is why it's so easy to integrate them. Sometimes you're working from the left side, sometimes you're working from the right side. For instance, in Theravada, we look a lot at correcting our faults, cutting off the fetters, uprooting the hindrances. On the Vajrayana side and the Mahayana side, a lot of times we are focusing on the qualities of the awakened mind. So we are concentrated around what that looks like, what that feels like. We like try it on for size, to see and spend some time abiding in those spaces. So one has a suppression of hindrances almost as a primary practice. Another has the practice of taking up and experiencing for small periods of time the enlightened mind, the awakened mind, the fully compassionate mind. So we practice tolerating a slight or overlooking a fault. That's an example. On the other side, we would be looking at that behavior and say, does that bring suffering to me? Or does that bring suffering to the other? Does that bring suffering to both? And we rationalize, if it does, abandon it. But you can't always lay something down just because rationally it makes sense because of our habitual tendencies. And that's why it takes some practices that have us abiding in pockets of goodness that's maybe not how we actually feel, but imagining what it would feel like if I could do that. We always admire, those who great spiritual achievers. We admire, what do you call them? When they lay down their lives for others. Martyrs, yeah. We admire them, but we don't want to actually do it ourselves, And so there's a disconnect between like what we think and what we're actually willing to step into, to live into. But how do you think one gets such a mind that he would lay down his life for a friend? I mean, they get such a mind that they will gladly give their life, for an enemy. And, in the beginning, somebody might say, well, that's crazy. But as one's mind begins to shift and sweeten, see our interconnectedness and come to know that that there is more to life than grasping and clinging around me and mine, and start to to experience and taste some of that freedom, then the mind can gradually begin to wonder what it would be like to not be upset if you call me the N-word. Wonder what it would feel like to not be upset when you denigrate me because I'm a woman. Wonder what it would feel like, or because I'm poor. Wonder what it would feel like. Or because I'm uneducated. I wonder what it would feel like to not take offense at that, but to recognize and see your either deep ignorance or lack of empathy and pity that. I wonder what it would feel like. How liberating would that be for me? And you can just plug in your whatever in there, but you do have to bring it home because it is a part of neutralizing perceptions that we have, based on the sense gate information filtering through the bases, what we see here, taste, touch, smell, and think. And so that takes us to a place around some of the pitfalls with our modern take, our contemporary, as opposed to traditional take and placement of mindfulness. Now, in the Majjhima Nikaya, Sutta number 62, when the Buddha and his son were going out on alms rounds, the Buddha was leading the way, his son was behind him, and his son was thinking some thoughts. He was thinking about how handsome his father was, and that, and he was handsome too. He was thinking his father is the leader of this great community, spiritual community, and like he's his son, like maybe like I'll inherit that too. He was thinking, and he was lifted up in some kind of pride because of this. And Buddha said to him, Rahula, any kind of material form, whatever, whether past, present, or future, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far, near, all material form should be seen as it actually is with proper wisdom. Thus, this is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. And Rahula said, only material form, like looking at the body, like I'm so cute, I'm so fine, I'm so, he said, only material form? He said, not only material form, Rahula, but feeling, perception, formations, and consciousness. And so then Rahula said, who in the world would go out on alms rounds after being rebuked by the Buddha like this? And he turned around and he went back. And when he went back, he saw Sariputta. And Sariputta told him, he said, Rahula, develop mindfulness of breathing. When mindfulness of breathing is developed and cultivated, it's a great fruit and great benefit. And so Rahula went back and he meditated. And after some time, he went and asked the Buddha later that evening. And he said, how is mindfulness of breathing developed and cultivated so that it is of great fruit and great benefit? And then he went into this and he said, whatever internally belonging to oneself that is solid, that is water, that is of the fire element, that is of the space element, this should be seen as it actually is. This is not mine. This I am not. This is not myself. And he started right there. So, and then he gave him a further instruction. He said that when one meditates, that one has to be like these elements, since that's all there is to this body is these elements. And he said, so you can spit in the wind, you can pour debris on the ground, you can throw trash in the ocean. He said, but the elements are not offended, they are not disgusted, and he said that let your meditation be like that. So he's saying you have to lay aside then whatever feeling you have about things when you're going into meditation, being willing to lay aside the feeling. So laying aside the feeling doesn't necessarily mean that one is not examining what they feel, but what it means is there is a purpose for this inquiry, a purpose for this sitting. And if one cannot immediately drop into a neutral state because of the hindrances, right, then one has to work with them until they do. And one knows the progress that one is making in the meditation because that grasping, the clinging, the craving, the aversion, the cares that you are presently holding begin to drop away. So if one trains oneself that when I sit here, now, there may be some issues I have to deal with today. There may be something on my mind, but I am gonna wash right now. I'm gonna wash my views and my opinions and my feelings that's based on perception. It's based on what I have seen and what I've heard and what I have thought. I'm gonna wash myself now and get into a neutral state so that my mind can be more stable, that I can look and see the beautiful and the ugly. I can see what is good and what is not good. I can come to a middle way. And so that's the attitude in which we undertake that particular practice. And so whenever this mindfulness, sati, is used, and the words relating to that, it is not bare awareness. Now, the reason I want to talk about it not being bare awareness or to share, because I know some minds are getting busy already. And the whole purpose of this is to allow you to go deeper, is to allow you to really get a hold of the truth in a fuller way, so that one can really uproot our misperceptions, and we can see something that we weren't able to see before because we're still holding on. So it's not something that is designed to make you feel wrong. I'm not talking about wrong. I'm talking about right mindfulness, and I'm trying to bear it out through the scriptures. I'm going to give this to you, sister, and if you look in this section on the aggregates, and it's a section that's I believe it's in aggregates. I hope it's in aggregates, and it talks about the difference between perception. Wisdom, and found it for me. But it starts with perception, and it says that perception is like a child. That's a beginning stage, or perception, or like, and bare awareness is what comes even before perception. So bare awareness, if we're like, and noting, is a most preliminary practice and a most incomplete practice. And if we use that as the basis of our understanding of the Dharma and the intention of the Dharma, we can't grow. We can't develop. And that's why we have so many problems in our, I won't say our Western, because Europe is Western too, but in our American standards. Because at a time that we should be able to, as they say, eat meat, meaning be able to digest, deep teachings, we still are on tablets, baby food. That's not it. Okay, yeah, keep looking. That's not it. it'll speak just the way I said it to you. And if I don't find it, I will find it if you can't find it. And so we find ourselves not being, and we get trained in this mode like that's all there is, and that's good for stress relief. It's good for psychological problems. It's good for all that, but that's not what the Dharma is for. And so if we really have to not only decide, but I think we owe it to people if we call ourselves Dharma teachers to be rooted in the Dharma. And I know that if you're teaching in a school, you can mention the B word, the Buddhist word. You can mention the D word. I think maybe the Dharma word. Then we need to really look and see how we should speak of ourselves in the community, and whether we should really associate ourselves in a certain way with the Buddha Dharma. Because what happens is it brings into the Buddha Dharma a kind of a counterfeit teaching that brings into question or causes people not to hear the message. And I think that I'm trying to be very careful with my conversation today, because I have many, many, many wonderful friends within the mindfulness circle and community. But I've given a lot of thought this year to this since we've had a chance to be closed and to reflect. And I thought about the purpose for our Heartwood, to preserve and promulgate the teachings of the Buddha Dharma. And I looked at our retreat schedule last year, and 90% of it was mindfulness teachers. And we've decided that this year it's going to be Dharma. You can go just about any place and get a mindfulness teaching. But this year, and the years moving forward, it's going to be the Dharma. So I'm trying to share some of the pitfalls of viewing mindfulness simply as a process of bare attention. Because the cultivation of bare attention, it is valuable in many ways, but it's incorrect to equate that with mindfulness according to the canon, because the canon didn't put it together in that way. Mostly because it doesn't have a lot to do with the cultivation of wholesome states of mind and the attenuation of unwholesome states of mind. And this is the basis for all mindfulness in order for it to be right mindfulness. And that's why some of us have written programs for the military to use mindfulness programs for the military, for example. How to be better at killing is not the object, so that's not a right kind of mindfulness. And any way that you look at it, the excuse has been, well, that can help that soldier in that moment to where he has to make a split decision, to make a more informed decision. No, it doesn't, because he has an order. And he's trained to do a certain thing. And they're not really trained to think about what's the most wholesome, useful, compassionate thing to do. That's not what their job is when they're out there. So even if you have a good intention in writing it, once you sell it to the army, then they're going to use it in a way that benefits and enhances their purpose, is what I'm saying. And I saw one article where someone actually said the Buddha was not against war. And I read the first paragraph and I just stopped reading. It wasn't even worth my time. But some people are going to read that because we're using things to justify our reasoning for putting it out there. I read someone said some of this has to do with the training and the commitment of our teachers in the world today. You know, and he said that suppose you had a dentist that was a part-time student and part-time dentist versus one who had gone through years and years of training and learning all that he needed to learn about dentistry, about anatomy, about whatever all the things a dentist needs to learn and to consider before he works on your mouth. And so would you want that kind of a dentist who had not had that kind of training, who didn't have that kind of full-rounded knowledge? Or would you want a doctor like that? No. But here we take the Dharma and the practices of the Dharma that we say we undertake because they lead to enlightenment, probably the greatest endeavor of our whole lives. And we want to commit ourselves to part-time teachers who have taken just the preliminary practice and built a brand around it and put it forward as this is the teaching that will take you where you want to go. And it cuts off, it actually uproots, eliminates, never even touches what the Buddha said we absolutely must know and must follow to truly be free, to truly be liberated in mind and in body and in heart. You could put those together and say, and in spirit. So I wanted to talk about a particular word, and there are some in the suttas who attained when the Buddha gave them a teaching on mindfulness, but they weren't beginners. That was something missing in their development. For instance, Bahia, he already had a high level of attainment, but there was something he missed. It's sort of like if you went all the way through school and you graduated, but they skipped you in the third grade because when you took your test, you were too smart, and they put you in the fourth, And so he had a high spiritual attainment, but he had one misperception in the ways of looking at things, and that was in the area of mindfulness, or particularly, and so when the Buddha taught him that little bit that was missing, and said, this is how you should train yourself, he immediately attained liberation. But if you're not immediately attaining liberation, then you need the other 99 parts of that 100 piece of equipment. And from this, some could easily use such suttas to conclude that bare attention is all that's needed in insight, not recognizing, not knowing his story, not knowing his history. I gave a Dharma talk last month, and when I asked, I said I'm going to read you something from the Majjhima Nikaya, and I asked who in the Sangha had a copy of the book. No hand went up. Who even read some of the suttas? No hand went up. Who had even heard of it? No hand went up. So when we think of sati speaks of remembering. So there's it means more than to just simply be aware of what's there. And then noting then would have to be more than just noting, breathing, walking, sitting, thinking. Because remembering requires an action of bringing something to mind and considering it in the present moment for the purpose of how it can be used in the future. So it brings the past and the present and the future. And that creates a whole different way of something landing on you that won't be, it changes your experience of unattachment or of detachment. So that one doesn't develop a coldness because they can they can just cut that off, No conscience, no looking to see what is the wholesome way to respond. Understanding what it'll cost me to do it and making a decision of whether I will do it or not. Counting up the cost. Seeing where I am so that I know I'm not ready yet, but knowing that. Not thinking you are when you aren't. Being able to put it into its proper framing and proper circumstance and know how that will affect a situation, how that will impact something, how that will affect someone. And that's why we can do things and we think it's like a good thing. And if it just stood off by itself alone, it would be a good thing. But when you put it into context, then a good thing may not necessarily be a good thing. So mindfulness in training on the pillow begins to prepare us for that kind of mindfulness off the pillow. Because it's off the pillow where we, live and move and have our being. That's where it's walked out. That's where it counts and it really matters. And if one hasn't developed the capacity to do that, then when one gets up from their meditation, they're not much different than when they sat down, except for some personal freedom, because I don't even have to think about that. I don't have to consider that. We're not going to talk about right and wrong. We're not going to talk about wholesome and unwholesome. We're not going to work on ourselves at shifting our views. And that's why we can't still have an honest conversation. We still have to use euphemisms so that I won't hurt your feelings. Talking about what is true, because you can't handle the truth, because that level of integrity has not been introduced into the process. It's why you can't even see and can't understand what's wrong with some things. Because we just want the conversation to be kissy face and good and sweet, or more often than that, we just don't talk about such things. Then what shall we talk about if it's not the issues of life? What is this whole thing for? But to get better, to become more harmless, to truly be able to see the other as oneself. Not to build our egos, not to create careers. It's not for this sort of thing. So in the Visuddhimagga, did you find it?
There's two different variants along
This is it. That's it. Thank you so much. Thank you both so much. So in this same book, the Visuddhimagga, The Path of Purification, Buddhaghosa talks about this topic of mindfulness, that by means of mindfulness, we are able to recall things or events in the past and he gives the characteristics of this kind of mindfulness. Says it is not floating, meaning that the mind is closely engaged with whatever your object of attention is. It's not losing, indicating that mindfulness enables us to maintain our attention without forgetfulness. Its manifestation is guarding or being face to face, implying that one holds attention firmly to the chosen object. It's not just watching, arise and fall away, arise and fall away, rise and fall. It's be able to. It calls the holding the rope of mindfulness. It is relatively stable, and its basis is strong noting, discerning quality, which is crucial in determining the quality of something. And that's not just watching it arise and pass away, arise and pass away, arise and pass away. To be able to hold firm to it, to look at it, to remember and recall how this has affected, and therefore will affect, and where does that fit in within the scope of virtue and ethics, and it's all of these things. That's how we change inside, and that's how we are able to see a harmless action or harmless way of thinking as harmless, and to see a harmful way of thinking as harmful, being able to put it into the proper context with the proper shading, and having a history to be able to predetermine a result and decide, is that the result that I want? And so you can see this is a very deep and intricate kind of process and introspection. In the Sutta on this section I wanted to read, it said, perception is like a child without discretion who sees a coin, and because it apprehends, or the child apprehends, the mere mode of appearance of the object as blue or whatever, that's all he can do, is like give its most superficial characteristics. Consciousness is like a villager seeing the coin, and because it apprehends the mode of the object as blue, but his understanding extends further, because he knows not only is it blue or long or short or round or square, but he also knows that it has a value. This is worth 5 cents, this is worth $5, this is worth $20. It says, but then understanding is like the money changer who, seeing the coin, knows more than its shading, its color, its size, more than the fact that it has value, and can be spent, used as commerce. It's more than that. He knows whether it's really a gold coin or whether it's 20 karat gold, 10 karat gold, 16 karat gold, counterfeit gold, brass. I had someone gave me, she wanted to make an offering, donation. She didn't have money, and she gave the Hermitage a bracelet. And as far as I can recall, this is the only piece of jewelry that has been given to us as a donation, as an offering, or for any purpose. And she said, this is gold, take it and cash it in and use it for whatever the Hermitage needs. And so we kept it for about 6 months, or maybe a year, but then times got really tight. And I said, I'm gonna take this and see what it's worth. I took it up and he pulled out his pliers or tweezers or whatever, and he began to take the bracelet apart. And it had lots of charms on it, and it had rings that bound the charm to the bracelet. And then the bracelet was also in rings. And then he began to separate them out. He holds some up. He looked at some under a light. And then when he finished, he had piles. He said, this is, and I don't know about gold, but I think it was something like, all of this is 18 karat gold. This right here is 10 karat gold. This is not gold at all. It's brass, and this has no value. And he gave a price for that pile, that pile, that pile, and that pile. You know, and so he says that understanding is like that versus consciousness, because consciousness, the thinking consciousness combined with the other 5 consciousnesses can let us know that something has some value to us or doesn't have value to us, versus perception, which can just merely identify it by outward characteristics. And so if we want to grow into depth and have the panya that understands things all together, we're going to have to go deeper than modern insight practice. That's what I'm saying. And I'm not saying it. The Buddha himself said it. I'm just sharing it with you and trying to give you a basis for the development of true skill and true seeing. Actually, it's a great article, and if anybody wants the article, if you'll email, what's our email? That one? Is that the one you want
Or
to send?
register,
Registrar?
yeah,
Uh,
or retreat.
Okay, so if you will email registrar, well, I think it should all go in one place. I was thinking about info. No, okay. registrar@heartwoodrefuge.org and ask for a copy of the article on mindfulness versus spiritual awakening, and we'll be glad to send you the link. It was written in 2007, so the conversation's been going on for a very, very long time. A very long time. And we need all the help we can get in helping that which is genuine to remain in the world. So in this article, it says, some contemporary teachers seldom emphasize right view or right intention, even though in the Buddha's teachings, right mindfulness only emerges within the context of right view and right intention. Right intention is the motivation for practice based on recognition of the nature and the causes of suffering and the yearning to gain irreversible liberation from mental afflictions that lie at the root of suffering. And he said, I'm not saying he says, And I think it's doubtful that the practice of mindfulness alone will result in any world transcending realizations. Again, if mindfulness as it is commonly understood today were all that is needed to achieve liberation, then all the rest of the Buddha's teachings would be pointless. And so how the teachings have been preserved and passed down, over millennia is, a little bit different than the what's happening today. This kind of a Protestant Reformation, the decline in Buddhist monasticism and the increased popularity, of course, of meditation among lay Buddhists and among non-Buddhists. Okay, and it's wonderful that so many people nowadays are incorporating, meditation into their daily life, but it's important not to overlook the value of devoting or through the value of precept and example of how of the years of study that was put in to understand the concepts that lay the platform and the ground for the transformation that can be expected. And if we don't lay that groundwork within ourselves, then we have no platform by which to reach the promises, and it becomes one more empty practice, or one more self-help thing that we're doing and convincing ourselves that we're making so much progress. But this descent into a kind of life, a kind of a way of being that has life and that gives life, was the purpose of the Buddha's teaching. He basically said you have to die to yourself to find life. You have to die to your self-centered views to find life. You have to really see the clear limitations of external things. You have to really understand that what you see in front of you is what you make up in your mind that it is. And because you make up in your mind that that's what it is, you end up creating that externally. And so if we look at our world today, then we know what's in our minds. We know what stories we tell ourselves. We know what pictures we have painted there. So it wasn't like a devil came up from under the sea and mesmerized us. It wasn't like a God came down from the sky and burnt us. This is what we see out here. The systems that we create and that we preserve and the ways of thinking that we perpetuate, that have some self-seeking purpose. And even though we know it's not right, we can't give it up. Or worse, we don't even know it's not right. We can't even see how it harms or how it destroys. We haven't built up any stability inside ourselves to apply any disciplines, to consume less. We can't make the little changes because we're so attached to our comforts. And even when we say we're going to take some time out and go into a simple environment, we bring all our wants in there and pollute that space too. And then we leave thinking what good practitioner I am. Or we leave thinking, oh boy, I am so different. I have changed so much. And there has not been that transformation. And the Buddha said, when you see this, he said, I fault. He said, he turned to his senior monks and he said, I fault you. Because you have not told them what needs to be told. Then he turned to the other monks and he said, and I also fault you because there has not been that coming to hear, that inclining, that putting into practice what you have heard. So he basically said, nobody's fault but ours. That's why we don't have to blame anybody for anything. But I say to you today that we can be that which we are looking for when we decide that we really do want to be. We want to be the change that needs to occur in the world. To be the change that needs to occur in the world. That's a good way to think about it. Not as an I participating in a process of betterment. But when we start thinking that there are only these processes, that's what dependent origination is. And then we start to think of consciousness as opposed to thinking of as my thought, but just seeing, consciousness itself as a process rolling. And it inclines into one direction or another. Impersonal. Then there will be that turning towards that which is wholesome. Because I'm no longer having to think what it will cost me. And the Buddha says that in that space, right there, between me and the other, that middle place, I can experience the other as myself. I can experience myself as the other. Not just my thoughts about what I'll do, harmful or helpful, but I will really know what that action, how that action will land on everybody else. Because I'm not seated at the center of my world, at the center of the universe. This is a kind of non-self, if you could accept it. It's not like just losing any sense of understanding anything in the world, but it's vacating the center so that things aren't done with a me in mind. And after a while, there just becomes the process. It's just the doing, I'm not telling you what to do or even how to do. One recognizes that there is just the doing. So one gets up today and sees what needs to be done. Starting right where you are. With the whole in mind, not my agenda for today. Or how I want people to see me today, but with the whole in mind. And then one knows where to fit in the corner over here, or perhaps to fit in the center here, or to fit on the side. So if I don't have the skill at all, just step back. And not just stepping back because I'm too lazy to cultivate and develop myself, so that my go-to is like, that's not my strong suit, or like, oh, that's how I am, or, it will actually uproot that kind of laziness, which is a hindrance. It's a hindrance, that's all. I'm calling laziness a hindrance. I'm not calling anybody lazy. You understand the difference? We don't want to take the time to investigate, to learn something, to even be able to change our view. And can know that we have a view that's not beneficial or wholesome or useful. Dare I say, not right. But it's going to take too much, and I have to look at gory pictures of what people have done to people to really get it, and I don't want to be confronted with that. I just want to think happy thoughts. Or I don't want to think about you at all, which is even worse. But if one can look at it and arouse a mind bent upon compassion and love and kindness, that's different than saying, I don't want to see, I just want to do the happy dance. Both of them, it may be the happy dance, but one is with clear seeing, being touched by the feeling of the infirmity of those that are suffering. And the other is like not looking, just walk on by, pretend it doesn't exist. And that's how we can show up in the real world. These practices are designed to help us show up, to help us have enough courage and enough strength to not turn our head because we don't want to see, but to be able to look clearly at something. And to be able to penetrate the minds that have fabricated and outpictured that kind of scenario. To see where the ditty is in their mind, to be able to talk with them and arouse in them the confidence that they can be different, that they can transform their minds. Their minds can be renewed. But to do that, ours have to be renewed. The Apostle Paul said in the Bible, it would be a shame that after I preach to others, I myself become a castaway. What time is it? Oh, okay. So we're going to close out. But I really recommend that you read this article and ponder. I'll say ponder the argument, but it's not an argument, actually. It's a defining of the terms as they were originally and consistently throughout the canon. The understanding that they bring the full-bodied understanding. Comparing sutta with sutta, with sutta with sutta, with Mahayana, Theravada, Vajrayana, Zen, they like their own category, Zen. And being able to come with a perspective and an attitude towards the intentions and the breadth and the depth and the volume of the insight of the Dharma. And on that basis, find some confidence that truly there is a way of escape. from samsara. And if you don't know what samsara is, I rest my case, Google it. So I thank you all for tuning in today. And look forward to talking to you on Tuesday. There are some people who have sent me, or a couple emails that, I'm new to Buddhism and some of this is like water over my head. That's okay. Ignorance is not bliss, you should know. We're not trying to create a rosy picture of anything. We're just speaking to things, as they are, and that's part of maturing and becoming spiritually mature and even intellectually mature is to be able to not have rose-colored glasses on, but to understand clearly what the Buddha was talking about, if that's what you want to know, if that's why you come. And so we talk about the good, the bad, we talk about the beautiful, the ugly, and we can't always start from the beginning, else how will those who are maturing keep going on, keep going forward, right? So we have to have some of these like adult conversations. We have to have some more critical exploration of and go into more depth around our practices, but not just around our practices, but our attitudes towards them out and even examining our thoughts around them in line with how he has expressed the intention, the purpose, and the fruit of the practices that he laid down that we have picked up. So may you be well and happy and peaceful. May no harm come to you and no danger. May you grow in the wisdom and understanding to always be able to meet the inevitable difficulties of life. So when I was a child, I thought like a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. I loved being a child when I was a child. But when I became an adult, I wanted to act, to understand, to know like an adult. I don't know.
What's the name of it?